On today's podcast,
a little bit about hire the best people, hire to your weakness, hire the people that can help you achieve your plan, okay? Make sure that their desires are aligned with yours, but it's people and all the aspect that go with that.
the truth is, adding value will never go out of style.
This podcast is brought to you by iWatch Security. iWatch Security. Get the savings and service that you deserve.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for another 5 Things podcast. I'm Brian Smith, your host, and today I've got I consider you a friend now, Spencer.
It's been a long time.
Long-time client, great guy. I've always had the most respect for you, and I'm really glad you took the time to join me for your first podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Yes.
So excited to have you here and talk about some things that I normally haven't got into on a podcast, other than actually my second one. I did a guy who does corporate consulting. That was my second podcast in his house on a couch, so that was kind of a different one. But Spencer with 10X Consulting, tell us a little bit about what you do, Spencer.
Well, 10X Consulting was started 15 years ago, born out of my corporate America and early stage startup growth experience, where I found a lot of small business owners were curious to learn about some of my life lessons and for me to share some of the skills that I'd learned. And so over the past 15 years, I've had a variety of different types of clients. But what I really focus on is working with CEOs, executives and business owners on how they can develop the needed go-to-market operational efficiency plans and perspectives such that they can engage in a predictable manner to drive their revenues and increase their profitability in the long run. Basic business practices.
Okay. And some of your background, I know you've been a CEO before. I know you've been VP of sales.
So I'm blessed in my long career of starting in corporate America with big publicly traded, big public names like Xerox, McAfee, Symantec, Secure Computing. And then in the last 25 years of my career, I've been focused on more early stage security, cybersecurity largely focused companies. Venture capital funded, private funded companies. One here in Cary, North Carolina called Cove Light Systems a few years back, where I was CEO. And that was locally funded by venture capitalists and had a successful exit in the course of doing business there. So I've had a lot of different experiences that I pull from to share with my clients.
That's awesome. And right now, your main target client would be someone like who, for example, if you had a wish list?
So I like working with small businesses at the executive level, CEOs, business owners, key executives, sub 30 million a year in revenue size. And really what I'm offering is all aspects of corporate development, helping them run their businesses more efficiently with different strategies and tactics, specific executive coaching in the role, having been in the chair many times, how I can help based on sharing my experiences. Sometimes in a small business, you're not ready for a full-time, high horsepower executive and you want a fractional part-time person. I'll step in and do that. But really my love is to focus on the fourth category, which is all things go to market as it relates to monetizing your intellectual property or building your company such that you drive your revenues and increase your profitability and market share, et cetera. And so from a go-to-market planning and tactical execution perspective, those are the 4 different categories that I focus on.
Okay. Well, we're definitely going to dive into that a little bit more because I'm genuinely interested in some of your experience. See if I can pick your brain here for free for a little bit. But where are you from originally?
I grew up in Long Island, New York, and a small little town out near the Hamptons, so far from the city, and I didn't really absorb a hard accent.
Okay, I was going to say I wouldn't have picked up on that.
And I started my trek south, going to the University of Maryland to school, and when I got out of school, I was hired by Xerox, and they moved me around up and down the East Coast, where I spent the bulk of my early adult life in Atlanta, and spent a good many years there, married my wife who talks funny and is my best friend of going on 40 years of marriage today, but then moved to the Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill area in the early 90s and raised our 3 children here and have been a member of the business community here. probably one thing that's unique about my business background and enabled me to live where I wanted to live, which is a core tenet of my topic of work-life balance when we get to that, is having been in the technology business and in the early 90s, I was working for Symantec. They were the first company that had one of the first big public companies out of Silicon Valley that embraced remote virtual employees. And so being an executive with that company and managing salespeople on the East Coast, I worked out of a spare bedroom in my house, and it was near an airport here in Raleigh, so I could go anywhere I needed to go, and whether that was headquarters in California, or it was customers in New York City, or wherever in between. And as the years progressed and the companies changed, if I needed international or whatever, I could fly in and out of Raleigh-Durham. So that's been that's helped me learn a lot of key skills about time management and discipline, and has great appreciation for what the vast majority of workers got thrust into 3 years ago with the COVID lockdowns. It was a new thing for most people, but for me, I'd been doing it for the better part of 30 years.
What do you think? What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes people make with working from home or remote working?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think my initial assessment is, it's easy to say people lack discipline, but what I really have grown to believe is people take shortcuts on being prepared. And most notably, and what drove me crazy about watching a lot of the media coverage of the whole virtual concept, if you go to work virtually in front of a Zoom camera or a video chat session, and you're dressed up top, but you're sitting there real cute in your boxer shorts, at the end of the day, you got to be honest with yourself. You're not 100% engaged for that particular business outing. And it's always amazing to me how many people think that's a cute, cool shortcut. And early on, when the pandemic hit, I got asked to provide some coaching for newly remote employees. And one of the first things I always used to do, and I learned it from my years earlier managing remote employees, years ago, I would make it a point to show up in Omaha, Nebraska, to visit with one of my employees, to really understand what their home office was like, and where it was in the home, so I could visualize if they needed to go get something off a printer, how far away the printer was, or if they were away from their desk having lunch or whatever. And the employees had great appreciation for that, because I understood more about their family situation and their personal professional goals. And we talked through a lot about getting your game face ready, which back in the day it was just your telephone voice ready. Right. But you talk about being dressed for success is an old adage that everybody lives by. In today's day and age, I think you really have to live that to the literal meaning. And you would no more go to a business meeting in your boxer shorts with a shirt and tie on. Why would you think it's okay to sit in front of a video screen that way? I get that there are people that do it. But I really think it plays to the overall psyche and discipline of individuals.
I think the mental preparedness, when you're dressed, you feel ready.
Yes.
You feel good. Like, I like dressing nice, and part of it is it makes me feel good.
Right.
And so I think that's important. Something I learned early on, being self-employed for most of my life at this point now, is not mixing things, like not doing laundry while I'm doing work, because it took a little bit of away from my focus. You hear the beep, 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 and I got to go take it out of the washing machine, throw it in the dryer. So that was long before 2020. But I spoke with someone a while back. They had a work office, and they had a little sign, and it was their office hours.
Yep.
And when there's office hours, everybody in the family knew I'm working.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm at work. Don't interrupt me unless it's like an emergency or something. So I think that all plays into the overall psyche.
Yeah.
And probably efficiency and focus that you're bringing to that.
Absolutely. And, in my home office days, I actually, for a majority of my time, I had a door had a glass window in it. And all of my kids knew that if the blind was closed on the door, Dad was busy.
All right, so similar principle.
So it was it was a similar kind of thing.
Yeah.
At the same time, they all would understand the value of being quiet and the thought process that went with it, and different things like that. So I think you're spot on with your observations on that, and people learn from those kind of experiences.
Sure. And it's the other thing we just kind of mentioned, it's a team effort.
Yep.
It's your family contributing to your success and your focus.
Absolutely.
So they're part of the solution too, or part of getting the best. Backing up a little bit, why Maryland? What made you want to go to Maryland?
I, at the time, growing up in New York, I was looking to get away out of the state of New York, which had a very good higher education system. And Maryland was similar to that, but
Okay.
I also wanted a very large university experience. When I went to Maryland, there were 40-some thousand students there. It was the largest university population of students on the East Coast. And I came from a high school that had 600 people.
All right.
One stoplight town, and it was just a small little fishbowl, and I was just kind of ready to bust out as a teenager and go somewhere big. And I also wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, and so I wanted to go to a university that would offer me a lot of different
Exposure to a bunch of different...
scholastic and life experiences, which I certainly got that in spades.
Now, are you a crab cake snob?
I wouldn't say a snob, but I'm a crab. I'm a crab aficionado. So
All right,
yes,
that's fair
yes.
enough. So most
Yeah.
people that like grew up around
Yeah.
Maryland or go to Maryland for an extended period of time, it's like,
Yeah.
don't offer them a crab cake unless it's really amazing.
Well, it's a skill I learned to pick my own crab meat. So I have my own crab pots, and I have my own crab picking right on my deck. So I do that on a regular
All
basis.
right, well, that's fair enough. If you could go back in time and talk to young Spencer getting ready to go to college, what would you tell him? And here's a caveat. He's actually going to listen.
Yeah.
So there's the caveat. What would you tell him?
I think that I picked the large university for the diversity there, and there was such a diverse population of professors and students. It was great, and I made a lot of great friends and experiences. If there was one thing that I could do differently, I would have sought out professors as mentors. I was hell-bent on my independence, and again, an overarching theme for me is anybody's strength taken to excess can become a weakness, and I've really grown to appreciate that. And I really wanted to be independent, and so I was determined to be self-sufficient and have my independence and do that. And in retrospect, if I could do it again, there were a couple of different university professors that I had really great relationships with, but I made the mistake of not staying in touch with them or going the extra mile to engage on different class projects and things of that nature. So for the younger people that are out there, that's one thing that I'm very passionate about, that you really need to seek out mentors and coaches to help you.
Right. Well, here's the other thing too. It's probably a lot easier now. It was probably $1 a minute for you to stay in contact with a professor back then.
That's true.
Whereas now you can connect on LinkedIn, which is how we reconnected.
Yeah.
So I would say that there's so many more opportunities nowadays that are opportunities to do better, but they're also pitfalls in many ways.
Right.
And it's probably like anything. It's like money. It's like anything, really. There's positives and negatives how you use it.
So here's the reality of it. Hindsight's a beautiful thing.
Sure.
Right? I mean, but if you live your life in a world of woulda, shoulda, coulda, then you're going to hinder your success.
Right.
And I have another sort of a philosophical point that I try to live by is, if you spend your time and think it's analogous to driving a car. If you're obsessed with looking in the rearview mirror, what's going to happen?
You're going to have a wreck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, a rearview mirror is a useful tool when you're driving a car. It's always good to get some perspective from where you've been to help you understand where you're going, but you can't dwell on it and you can't focus on it. There's just too many other unknown, beautiful opportunities to experience in life that you just want to get out. And I'm a big advocate for change. It scares the hell out of many people, but I enjoy it because it forces you into learning something new or adapting and testing yourself. So that's one thing that I've appreciated.
I agree. And it's important to reflect, I think, because like John Maxwell says, you win or you learn. And if you're learning, it's a win because you can learn from that mistake and move on and not dwell on it.
Right.
Put your energy on the future. Put your energy on the going forward. there was another thought I had there. Wisdom. We all want wisdom, and there's two ways to get wisdom. It's either, beating our head against a wall, doing something we shouldn't have done, and you figure out, I don't want to do it that way again. So now you're a little wiser, or we can take the wisdom of somebody else and really try to apply that, which is, I've beat my head against the wall plenty. I like to get wisdom from other people now. I've had plenty of headaches from beating my head against the wall.
And it's fascinating you bring that up, because that's really what people say. Well, why aren't you retired? Why don't you? I enjoy doing what I'm doing. I like being the teacher and the mentor, the coach. Mm-hmm. I enjoy the intellectual challenge of helping people figure things out. And I'm sharing my professional lessons learned that I've been taught. I mean, I was fortunate enough to go to work for a company like Xerox right out of college. The amount of money they invested in me for sales and marketing and management is just, it's not done anymore. I mean, the companies just don't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. Yet at the same time, I went on from that and I worked for a number of different fast growth, high profile public companies in Silicon Valley, as you mentioned, Symantec, McAfee, Secure Computing. And then I turned that into going to smaller startup type companies that were funded by very high profile venture capitalists, where the pace and the expectations and et cetera were fast and furious. But what I learned from that, to be able to share those lessons and share that wisdom, and to me, there's nothing more rewarding than seeing the proverbial light bulb go off when you're talking to somebody or you're helping them through a dark spot with their respective career and profession. And that's one thing about my practice. It's interesting how as I've worked to become that trusted counsel and advisor by word of mouth and referral, I have clients that are executives with large companies, multi-million-dollar responsibilities, to early stage startups trying to figure it out, to highly skilled professional service providers like aerospace engineers, unmanned systems, brilliant technical people, but they need help operationally, or CPAs, financial service providers. It's fascinating. And all those people, say, what's the common thread to that? That's all over the place. It's fundamental business operational guidance, corporate development, coaching, leading by example. They could really benefit from a Fortune 500 trained kind of chief operating officer, but for a variety of reasons, the least of which is the cost of hiring that person. They just need that maybe once a week or once a month or whatever. That type of thing is, exciting for me, and I enjoy those kind of challenges. And it's very rewarding with the feedback I get from my clients.
Yeah, and it comes back to like one of my favorite books that I've read as a business owner is The E-Myth, and understanding that just because you're a technician, or in my case, a good sales guy, and a good manager, or a decent manager initially. I had to get rid of my sergeant out of me early on, drove away some people with that military mindset. But at the end of the day, it's like, just because you're good at that doesn't mean you're good at business. And that's where I've learned over the years is that I've had to learn my self-awareness that, hey, I'm really good at this, I'm really good at that, but I'm terrible at administration. Right. Taxes, CPA, bookkeeping. We're licensed by the state. Anytime I have to deal with any licensing stuff, it's just a nightmare for me. So I've got someone in my organization that's really good at that now, and I can punt all that stuff to them. And they're a 10 in that area. I'm probably a 4, maybe a 5 if I really work hard at it.
Right.
But that's where I think understanding as quickly as possible as you're coming up, you might be a brilliant engineer. It doesn't mean you're going to be good at a lot of things, sales or marketing or branding or all the other things. So
right. And that proves out. And I will say that in my experience, that's very great that you figured that out about yourself. The challenge is for young entrepreneurs in particular, especially the really highly skilled technical ones where they've got a brilliant idea and they understand the problem but the reality is you've got to identify what your weaknesses are. And a lot of people, when they're really honest, can do that relatively easily. They may not openly admit it, but they look themselves in the mirror in the morning and they understand, well, this is a weakness of mine, so I need to get some help. So that's step one. But the second step is actually doing it. and hiring to your weakness. That's hard because now when you're trying to build your management team, as the leader of that, you have incrementally more challenge to maintain a proper vision, keep focus on the end game, because you've hired people that have skill sets beyond yours. And so it's really it's much more of a collaborative management approach as opposed to a hierarchical, do it because I said so, your sergeant days.
Sure. And I can relate to that. You know, it's another favorite saying I love is never tell someone to do something without telling them why. And that's worked well for me over the years, because initially it's like, well, you know, you coming from that military background, I said, do it. I'm the owner. Like, this is the way I want it done.
Right.
And that doesn't always serve well, because if they don't understand why. And I found when I started communicating and getting them to buy in on why we want to do it that way, I'm much more likely to get buy-in from the organization, and they understand, you know, this happened and the liability, or, you know, so it's a little thing, but it's a critical thing to have people buying into the mission.
Absolutely. And by the way, that whole concept of people buying into the mission, I find when I'm dealing with small businesses where they're maybe, you know, less than 50 employees and they're everybody's doing a little bit of everything. The challenge for the owner or the executive management team is to not only communicate the vision, but really communicate the reason why achieving that vision is important. And largely that represents the financial success of the company. And what I find is it's hard for most owners to say, well, you know, if we do this, my business is going to be obscenely profitable, and that puts my new car in the driveway or whatever.
Help me get my Aston Martin.
You know, and so you have to understand how to properly package that to use it as a management a management tool, and it, you know, that gets everybody to buy into it.
Or it could be maybe, and again, I'm just thinking how I would structure something is incentivizing the performance that you're looking for.
Absolutely. But
so everybody wins.
The incentive in my with my experience is only as good as the communication and tie into the overall vision. Is when you think about it, people want to be a part of something that's successful. I mean, I don't know anybody don't meet anybody that says, "Well, I work for this company that's a loser."
They suck.
You know, it's
right.
I mean, people want to hang around and rub elbows with and be a part of a winner, and they want to. And their self-gratification of, hey, I pulled that, or I helped make that happen. So I think as a part of some of the leadership coaching that I get involved with, especially with some of these younger, more technical entrepreneurs, whatever it is, whether you're developing software, you're building an unmanned system craft, or you've got a new service business in physical security, whatever it is you have your personal goals and objectives. You need to figure out how you broaden that lens to make it more appealing for others to buy into the vision of why your company exists, not just because it makes you a lot of money or you know it enhances your personal quality of life, but what is it your company's doing in the market that these people, your employees, can then say, oh, well, you know, when I'm picking up my kid at daycare, I can say, I work for this company. I'm really proud that I help move the needle, because it helps whether, and this ties to a lot of, you know, it's in vogue now. What are you doing for, you know, ESG perspectives, you know, environmental, social, and governance. And that, you know, it's top of mind finally, which is great. But if you really look at the history of successful companies, they've been doing a lot of that regularly.
Yeah.
It's always been that way. You know, the really successful companies always give back and always have a mission. Their growth is aligned to more of a community mission, because you're taking your employees out of that community. You want them to be a part of it.
So I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's really important that for example, as I grow my business, it's always been important to give back to the community, because I do want to feel pride about the company and the brand. And I think it's good marketing. That's one aspect of it. But the other thing is I think a good organization that is trying to serve your community. There's lots of different ways to serve your community. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I see a lot of companies doing a lot of great things. And then I also see, you know, companies being demonized all the time, you know, so I had someone tell me a long time ago, broke people can't really help broke people. And that's not 100% true, but I'll tell you what, a guy with $1 million in the bank can do a little bit more good. And a company with a revenue of hundreds of millions of dollars can do a lot of good.
Right.
So it's a balance. I think it's coming back to the conversation before. It's there's good things that can be done with a company with the culture and the right mindset, and you can do a lot of really positive impacting things depending upon the people running the company. Or you can do a lot of really bad things and take shortcuts and damage the environment or do whatever.
That most companies only exist because they have, number one, a product or service that the community needs and values, but the entrepreneur or leadership of that company has developed a solution for that. But then people focus on, how do I take care of my customers? How do I take care of my customers? Well, your customers are not only the people that pay for your product or service, but obviously they're your employees. And they're within the community that you serve. So I think you have to be aware of all three aspects on a daily basis. What is the community you operate in? It could be a geographic community. It could be a professional community. It could be an intellectual community. And we live in a virtual world, so there's really no physical boundaries on what that is from a digital perspective. But you do have to align yourself with smart people that have bought into the mission, and the mission is not only self-serving to that particular company and the entrepreneur, but aligns to something the community can relate to.
So I'm glad you brought that up. Secondly, talking back in time to a young Spencer Snedecor graduating from college, going into the corporate world, what would you tell him if he would listen to you?
That's a really good question.
And let's maybe frame it for today's time, because obviously, I think you said 40 years ago.
Right.
40 years ago, going into corporate America was totally different, probably, or maybe not totally different, but much different than it is today. Young college kid going to a corporation, you're not probably thinking about retiring there like you might have in your time, and the cultural expectation of those times, and things changed over the years.
Right.
So I bought you a couple seconds to think about it there.
And as you were talking about that extra description, it occurred to me, what was different then versus now. And I have one of my own children going through this experience right now. Is when I got out of college, I applied to certain jobs, and I had to prove that I was the square peg to go in the square slot. So if they determine we are a square peg and we have a round hole, you didn't get hired. Okay. And it was very much a conformist kind of go be a cog in a wheel kind of thing. And that's okay for some people. But what I grew to appreciate about myself, and part of my upbringing always being very entrepreneurial and independent and self-sufficient, is I grew bored and frustrated with that kind of an approach. So when you get out into the smaller company world, and in particular with the way the world has evolved today, where especially the younger generation is all about largely what's in it for me, I never thought of asking that. And a lot of people say, oh, that's terrible. Why do they do that? Why are they so self-centered? And I think a little bit of that is warranted, and they should.
Sure.
So what I counsel young people today, my own children and other young people soon out of college, is write your own job description and market that. It's not your resume that sells. It's you that sells your ability to get a job.
I think that's a great point.
So write your job description and
write
then
your
use
strengths,
what it is you want to do.
passions.
I like to do A, B, and C, and I believe I'm good at A, B, and C because of these things. So if you need A, B, and C at your company, I'm your guy, I'm your girl. And having that kind of resolve and commitment to know what it is you want to do, I think as a hiring manager, which I've hired many people in my career, because I know I need that square hole filled, and this person just defined to me what their idea of a square peg is, man, that's a no-brainer. That's a win-win. People are quick to criticize the younger people about it's the me generation, millennials, that's all they want is themselves or whatever. And I think there's a certain amount that us older workers can learn from that and I think that there's a blend there. And I do, by the way, I also, one of my private My personal passions is I work heavily with STEM programs in high schools and in the college arenas. In my these days I have a home in the Hampton Roads, Virginia Beach area, so I split my time between Hampton Roads and Research Triangle. And I'm very involved in that community in the Norfolk, Hampton area on STEM programs in the state of Virginia, because what's proven here in North Carolina, they got behind investing in Research Triangle Park and the universities and the public schools and everything. And other states are catching up to that. But I think it's really important for young people to embrace the critical thinking aspect of life. And take those kind of courses in college where you're going to be challenged to think. Math and science play a big role in everything that we do. Your ability to just be a problem solver. That's where you show value to a prospective employer, is your ability to take on challenges and figure them out because you've developed a cognitive thought process to think through and identify solutions to problems.
I want to go in like 6 different directions right there, but the first thing I'll say, sorry, Brian, critical thinking, and again, we're in 2023, right? We've been through 2020, the coronavirus, and it just seems like society changed so dramatically, and I don't want to necessarily get us off into any controversial topics, but the one thing that's kind of occurred to me more so than ever is that there seems to be a lack of critical thinking,
right,
generally speaking, from the public,
right,
whether it's me dealing with customers or just seeing and again, I'm not trying to get in controversial topics, but, someone would say, follow the science. And I would say, well, what's the science? I'm all about the science. I'm interested. What's the science? Well, you don't know the science. But you're beating your chest about the science. And it's like, well, you should at least have a somewhat foundational understanding of what you're saying. Or, if I say I believe in A, I've got a foundation for why I believe in A. And I'm always challenging myself on my thought process. So, for example, let's say you and I disagree on a topic. And I get this, I've always been naturally like this, but I love Ray Dalio, the billionaire investor, self-made billionaire. Whenever he thinks something's a good idea, he goes to the people in his organization that don't, and he wants to know why.
Right.
And I'm just naturally curious like that. If I believe that Tom Brady's the best quarterback of all time, and you believe Peyton Manning is, well, I want to talk to you about it because I'm curious. Well, I respect you. I think you're a great guy. You're very sharp and intelligent, but you think Peyton's better. Why?
Right.
And you have that conversation, and to me, it's intellectually satisfying to have that conversation. And it may not do a 180 from my point of view, but you might move the needle a little bit because I'm like, wow, you made some really good points on that.
Well, and to that point, when I work with the younger people, either those that I come in contact in high school, college, or even early in the first 10 years of their career, when we talk about cognitive thought process, and to use that example, follow the science, it's like, well, the first question I'll ask them is, so what are your sources? Where are you going for your information? And it's always fascinating to me that, the people that, well, I just take my news feed at face value, as opposed to those that say, well, I've subscribed to this scientific community. I'm a member of this group. I dig into this. I work with this professor on campus, whatever. So that tells me that they've got some depth and breadth to their thought process. And then it positions them to have an intellectual discussion as opposed to an argument.
Right.
And that's a key differentiator.
And I think that's a great point, is they've got a foundation for their perspective.
Right.
So they can intelligently discuss it versus just name calling or...
Right. And it's not defending your position, it's discussing your position. Okay. And, people, it's a cute little cliche, but variety is the spice of life. Yeah, that's great, but really appreciate it, and bring something to the table.
Right.
And I think that's one of the key things, and certainly one of the areas that I always focus on is you have to maintain your intellectual curiosity. It keeps you, not only keeps you relevant, but it keeps your mind working, and it really helps in that cognitive thought process, because I'll read something and say, that doesn't quite make sense, but I'll go on the footnote, or I'll click on the other link, and I'll dig down. And I'm advising a new startup cybersecurity company that's heavily focused on blockchain in Web 3.0, which is different than Web 3.0. So, there are subtle differences and what that means and how that works. And I'm working with a brilliant CEO who's got a lot of experience in blockchain and cryptocurrencies and what's happened in the last 10 years with that marketplace, and how it might help with some of the digital security, cybersecurity challenges we have going forward. And it's a learning experience. I mean, I know the fundamentals on how to operate the business and what typically works, but I don't know the idiosyncrasies of those kinds of markets. So for me, I have to go do some homework, which I don't view it as homework. I view it as, wow, that's cool. I want to learn more.
Sure.
And
you're curious about it.
Yeah, I think I think it's very healthy to have a little bit of Curious George in you.
Definitely.
So one of my favorite books I always keep nearby, Curious George.
You know what's funny is I grew up with
book.
a bunch of Curious George books.
It's
so much of us as a human being were developed at such a young age.
Right.
And I always wonder sometimes, like, why do I think so differently from some other people sometimes? And why am I so genuinely curious about, whether it's, I like intense conversations. I don't know why. Whether it's politics or coronavirus or, vaccine mandates, I enjoy those conversations and I enjoy different perspectives, but I'm not 100% dead set on anything because I don't know what I don't know.
Right.
And so the only way I gain perspective is by having conversations with people that have opposing points of view. And I can always say, listen, we might just have to agree to disagree, and that's okay.
Right. Well, it's maintaining an open mind. And what I find, especially when I work with older executives, they get kind of set in their ways. And they kind of say, look, I'm in the 8th or 9th inning of my career. I don't want to rock the boat. I'm just trying to do X, Y, and Z to accomplish the objective.
Right.
And, they'll come to me as, well, how can you help me? And more often than not, I'm just more of a professional coach, like almost in many ways like a therapist, but pulling from real world experience and that curious cognitive thought process that I naturally embrace. Well, why are you doing it that way? What are you really expecting? I mean, I know your business is growing at 20% annually, and I get you're trying to get here, but how do you really think the employees are going to feel about that? Or what's your end game? I see it a lot in service providing businesses where entrepreneurs have had a very successful 20, 30-year run of selling a service. And then they look, and it's purely a service of, especially in cybersecurity, practitioners of dealing with, tightening down networks and things of that nature. And they go, well, what's my exit plan? How do I retire in this business? I mean, it's provided great for me and my employees, but now what do I do?
Should have thought about that 5 to 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Right. It's a conversation that gets into, and all is not lost because what you come to find out is they've got certain tools and tricks and things that they've used to enable the efficiencies that they use internally. The question that just becomes, well, how can we productize them? Because obviously if you have a product, then you've got something of intellectual value that you can put a price around and somebody might want to buy. So now you've got something to build. And as you know, in the security business, you get the
recurring revenue,
which is similar in the software technology business. But the real value is creating a product that's tangible, that can not only have a current reoccurring revenue, but then a bigger company could say, well, if I take that in, then I have 500 salespeople across the country. This thing will be exponentially 10x bigger than it is today.
Right.
So that's what we want to focus on. But getting people to be open-minded, to think that way, is sometimes very difficult. Because it's scary, change. Nobody likes change.
Sure.
Right?
It's something that I have to constantly work on myself because I can look back in time and say, well, if my company didn't grow as much as I wanted it to, or it didn't perform the way I wanted it to, I know who's at fault. So that's why I always try to constantly look at me. It's not the employees, it's not the customers, it's not the market, it's me. Everything is me. And so That's one thing I think some people have maybe a tough time swallowing that pill, that it's whatever's going on, it's always my fault, or I'm a big impact on something.
And you have a very mature, seasoned view of that. So to your credit, you have grown to appreciate that. When I'm dealing with people from a coaching perspective and they're not quite there yet for a variety of reasons, whether it's maturity, ego, whatever it is, I will leave them with one simple parable, which is the only bad decision is no decision. And if you made a decision that didn't work out as you expected, what can you learn from it? And not only what can you learn from it, but what can your team learn from it? And not so much what did your team learn from it, but what did your team say you should do differently to avoid that from happening again? And so it really becomes not only self-awareness, but self-education and self-promotion amongst your team to build the business even stronger as a result of a decision that maybe wasn't the right one at the time.
You know, it's so funny, this is coming up. I had a conversation yesterday. Norman, the second name, Schwarzkopf, I think I'm saying it right. It's Desert Storm commander. One of the things I recall him saying a while back was that in the bureaucracy of the military, he felt that he did well in the military because he was decisive. He would gather the information, he would make a decision, and my understanding is this is really prevalent in corporate America, where people don't want to make decisions because their neck is on the line. If it's the wrong decision, they're the blame. Whereas Norman, or General Schwarzkopf, respectfully I should say, I guess, would be the guy that would make decisions. And he said, even if I made the wrong decision, it was better than the guy that didn't make one, because we're going down the road and I realize, 10 days after that we're going down the wrong path, but I can adjust course.
Right.
They're not adjusting course. They haven't even started.
Right.
And so I'm further down the road. Even if I went the wrong way, I'm further than they are. So, and then take ownership of the decision, which was, I learned that in PLDC, which was a military school, primary leadership development course for the Army, ultimate ownership. And I believe I'm good at that. It's like, I have no problem taking ownership if I made a bad call. I also have no problem saying that this is my call. And I respect everybody. Raphael tells me something, I really respect it because he's been with me a long time and he's got a lot of experience, or Julie. But at the end of the day, I'm going to make the decision. And if it was a bad decision, I'm going to own it. And I'm going to give kudos to the person that had the right decision. And, hey, we're going to learn as an organization, we're going to move forward, because nobody here is perfect.
Right.
And if somebody in the organization makes a wrong mistake, I'm not going to demonize them either.
And so when I give that kind of an overview to groups that I'm working with, or people I'm either on a one-on-one or a small group setting, I'll sum it up with a line from a Star Wars movie. As Yoda would say, do or do not, there is no try.
There you go. That makes sense.
And you just need to, embrace that whimsical thought and have comfort in yourself that whatever the outcome, you'll survive.
Absolutely. So I think that's a great move right into our 5 things. So you've got a list of 5 things that you'd like to talk about.
So, when you asked me to get and sit down for this session, I kind of thought about, well, what is it that kind of directs me and kind of keeps me centered? I believe that everybody, to be successful in the world, whether they're personal or professional life, you sort of have an internal gyroscope of different data points that kind of keep you centered. It's not always pretty. You're kind of bouncing off walls, but you're kind of going in the right direction, hopefully, of where you want to get. So the five big things that I look at is, first and foremost, I think you have to start with the end game, which is to always focus on what's your work-life balance. And that's easy for people to say, and people, it's it's cliche. I've got a great work-life balance. I only work 6 hours a day, and And I think you really need to peel that back a little bit and be honest. Look yourself in the mirror to say, what is work-life balance? And I think it has a couple of key aspects. First and foremost is your health, and I mean that from a mental and spiritual perspective, not overly religious, but just spirit. Everybody has a spirit inside them, and is it nurtured? Is the flame thriving, or is it being snuffed out? Your mental health. Are you right upstairs? Do you feel good about yourself every morning, whatever it is? Okay. And that your physical health, it's easy to talk about, I'm carrying an extra 20 pounds, I should do something about it, or I should really quit smoking, or whatever it is. You adopt a routine that helps you with that end game, because if you're not right with yourself, it's really difficult to be right with others. And as a leader running a business, that's first and foremost, your employees sense that. And the third sort of leg of that stool is keeping yourself intellectually stimulated, okay? And as well as emotionally grounded. So I guess it's a four-legged chair, to use that analogy. But make sure you're spiritually whole. Make sure you're mentally and physically right. Make sure you're emotionally grounded as in your relationships, whether it be with your spouse, your children, whatever. Make sure that you're good with that. And make sure that you're ready to take on the day in a very grounded, focused way. So that's number one, is work-life balance.
It's kind of foundational, so you can grow from that.
Exactly. And I think if you're doing everything right, it'll always come back to you don't have to brag about work-life balance. It just happens.
Right.
Okay.
I would kind of equate that to, if you're going to build a 18-story building, build it on a firm foundation.
Right.
Versus sand.
Right.
And if you don't have the work-life balance, or your relationships are bad, or your health is really bad, you're building that 18-story skyscraper on a sandy foundation. It's going to fall over.
And so part of that, what I just described in work-life balance, was the mental aspect. We talked about intellectual curiosity a few minutes ago. That kind of leads to number two, is you really need to sort of follow a disciplined approach to everything you do. And what I mean by that, and I offer this, is practice what I call the 3 L's. Wise man, one of my business mentors many years ago, turned me on to this. The 3 L's: look, listen, and learn. And when you think about that, it's pretty profound. You're looking and observing. Hopefully you've been given 2 eyes with proper eyesight to be able to observe everything that's going on around you. The visual stimulation that we get as human beings, whether it's in a personal situation or a business setting, it's invaluable what you're processing. The speed of light is very fast, and you're observing, there's a lot there. Listen, ask questions, be inquisitive. You've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Use the ears more than you use the mouth. It's amazing how that, will benefit you. And then the learn aspect of, as we talked, you're never too old to learn something new, and something as simple as I coach a lot of early young sales types where they haven't had real good sales training or whatever. And I'm going to go make a sales call on XYZ company. And I'm like, great. What do you know about XYZ? Well, I know they do this, this, and this. Okay. What about current events? What about executives? They haven't done any kind of research whatsoever. That just basic stuff to what market they're in, what are the topics of the day. That's from a professional perspective. And then personally, again, comes back to, what are you learning outside of the workplace that, excites you? A side note, my passion is boating and recreational boating and everything that goes with it on the Chesapeake Bay, which is my love. And I recently developed a friendship with a gentleman that owns a marina, and the metrics of operating a business that is amazing to me, to learn more about that and to be hands-on with it. And, it's fun too. So that's how I'd summarize that. Look, listen, and learn.
So number 3 is follow your plan.
Yeah, follow your plan. It's cliche, make your plan, work your plan. Everybody talks about planning. There's all kinds of little things. But what I've grown to appreciate, the plan really comes down to 5 key elements. What is the problem that your business solves or makes better or enables that you didn't know you could live without? What's the product or service? What are the people all about? What are the promotions? And most importantly, what's the passion? So a little bit about each one of those 5. Understand the problem that it is. You've identified a market opportunity. In your business, it's physical security and everything that goes with that. And how does that impact people in your target market? And what are the pros and the cons and the topical stories? And, similarities between us. I'm in cybersecurity primarily with my career. You're in physical security. There's a lot of emotional purchasing that's done. And then there's a lot of required, I mean, obviously, if you're going to have a business that has physical assets of great importance, you're going to want to have a proper physical security system. Same goes in the digital world. If you're a bank or a financial services institution with a lot of digital valuables, you want to make sure they're properly secured. So understanding what the problem is, that's great, and becoming somewhat of an expert in it to understand what the weaknesses are and what the solutions are, and then you come up with a better mousetrap or a good product, and that's wonderful. So now you have a product or a service that people need. But to put that together and to go to market, you need people. And it comes down to what we talked about previously, a little bit about, hire the best people, hire to your weakness, hire the people that can help you achieve your plan. Okay. Make sure that their desires are aligned with yours, but it's people and all the aspect that go with that. Of course, now that you've got a company, you need to promote it. And how do you promote it? How do you market it? How do you make people aware? How do you price it? How do you sell it? How do you make money? That's all under the promotional aspect. And of course, lastly, from my perspective, and this rings true, is, you need to be passionate about what you're doing. If you don't have a passion for the business, don't get into the business. I'm passionate about what I do as an independent consultant, which is why I still do what I do. I love working with the people and understanding the different aspects of their plan, where they're falling short of the previous four pieces that I talked about. And so when you really look at those 5 things and you kind of consciously make that as sort of the boundaries of how you're going to operate your business plan, understanding your market opportunity, what the problem is, what's your product different, what kind of product offering do you have, whether it's a physical, tangible good or it's a service, and all the aspects of why it's better or how you're going to succeed with it, hiring the best people, and, promoting it properly so people are aware of it and want to buy it, as well as be passionate about everything you can do. Because at the end of the day, not only can your employees, but your customers can see whether you're passionate or not about what you do. And people appreciate that. They want to be with passionate people.
So that's number 3. So number 4.
So the fourth one is assume success with your business. And, everybody gets into business and is operating business with the assumption they're going to be successful. That's why they do it, and whatever that means to you. Well, the thing that I find that many people lose sight of is, in your business processes, is it repeatable? Can you repeat it easily? Within reason, anybody can sell something once.
Sure.
But can you do it again? Okay. So is it repeatable? The second aspect of that is it predictable? It's great to sell something. It's even better to sell it again, but it's really wonderful to know that it's going to happen and have some predictability to it. And then once you start doing that and you're ramping your success up, the next thing is it scalable? Do you have the people in place to support it? And, can it become this flywheel effect? Because obviously you want to have a little bit of, momentum and inertia at wind at your back so that it gets a little bit easier. But you got to have everything in place to build a scalable business. And so I call this the ABLE, A-B-L-E, aspect of running your business. Is it repeatable? Is it predictable? And is it scalable? And if you're managing all those 3 things in harmony, guess what? You have something that is sustainable and, more importantly, valuable. And the value then becomes something that most business owners and CEOs are very concerned about, whether it's increasing shareholder value or it's increasing return on investment for the investors, or it's just what am I going to do when I want to retire in the next 10, 15 years. So I look at that aspect heavily.
Just to kind of add on to that from personal experience, one of the things that I got into the security industry largely because I got into straight commission sales after the military, and found out that I was a good sales guy, if you will, being able to build rapport with people pretty quickly. I think being ethical, just those kind of things. So when I first opened my company, when you start working with people and hiring and training, you have to have that process, because personality can get you through a lot, but you can't duplicate personality necessarily. So, you have to have a process. You have to have, I would say, a compelling story. You have to have kind of things you cover in your plan. So I can relate to what you're saying there in terms of looking back. I lost probably years because you couldn't duplicate. I couldn't duplicate myself. I had to figure out a way to package it a little bit better so that I could train someone. They could have their own style on the core information that we were talking to people about.
So that leads us to the fifth and final one that as I thought about this in preparation for us sitting down and having this conversation, and I reflected on, you start out with what it is you're trying to do, how you're trying to do it, who you're trying to work with, and how you're running your business on a day-to-day basis. The ultimate achievement of success is to become the trusted provider. And so the end game that you're trying to achieve here is to be a trusted counsel, a trusted provider, whether it's selling a product or a service, or it's just sharing of information. People have a question, they want to know to call. And it's building that relationship that kind of holds it all together. So as a trusted provider, and that, it's that word trust is often used, and in today's society, it's often challenged, both personally and professionally. But it's really something that, it's written about with people's character and integrity. It really comes down to trust. All right. You earn that. It's not given. So one of the things that I'm most proud of in my career is the referral business that I get, where people say, look, I was really challenged with this and I had this problem, and, Spencer was a good listener and he helped me understand what my options were, and then, helped me sort through to make the decision that was right for me. It was their decision. I was just the sounding board and the coach to kind of help them along, and so those are my 5 things. And I would say, as a bonus, if you do all those 5 things, you get to really realize the adage that life is short, work is hard. Make it as much fun as you can, and make the money you need to enable your destiny. Because as long as you're having fun, the old adage, do what you love, the money will follow. It's so true.
Yeah, when you enjoy what you do, you never work a day in your life, right? Exactly. So it's now, that being said, I do think there's context and nuance to that. I love a lot about what I do. I may not love 100% of it, right? But at the end of the day, I love the adage, and I definitely believe in it, because I'm not going to do something for 50, 60 hours a week that I despise. I'm just not going to do that.
Absolutely. And I think if you stay focused on topic number 1, maintaining that work-life balance, you will grow to appreciate and have the ability to turn it off, because you do need to turn it off.
Right.
That's one of the things I learned early on in my virtual career. Yeah, the office is in your home. It's been well documented that most of the time employees that work virtual work a hell of a lot more than they do if they work in their office. That's the good news for the employer's perspective. The bad news for an employee is you have to learn how to turn it off. Right. Yeah. But when you do those things in concert, from I think it can be very rewarding from a professional perspective. Maintain that work-life balance. Follow a different disciplined approach with the 3 L's that we talked about, and look at defining your business plan and process around what I believe are the 5 P's, and most importantly, the passion aspect of it. Anticipating success.
Ultimately, just finding that happy spot between everything. But
and to be the trusted provider.
Yeah. I mean, that's the journey. That's what we're all trying. We're all walking that tightrope the best we can, and we're constantly balancing and trying to rebalance. But that's why you got awesome professionals like you that have been there and done that, and come in and see things from a different point of view, and give you some great feedback and knowledge. So we're going to throw up your information on the podcast, but the website or the best way to reach you is?
I can be reached at my direct email address, Spencer at 10xconsulting.com. Okay. And you can find me on LinkedIn under Spencer Snedecor. I think the link is on will be flashed up here momentarily, as well as my website, 10xconsulting.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing today, Spencer. This is good stuff. And I had to really keep my trap shut several times, because I didn't want to pull us off into a 4-hour podcast, but I really enjoyed talking with you, and super happy you made it out for the podcast and sharing with our audience today.
Likewise. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank
I wish
you,
you
and
continued success.
Thank you, Spencer, and ditto. And thanks for joining us for another 5 Things podcast. We'll see you next time. Hello, this is Brian Smith, and thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more valuable content.